Now let's look at the Mode Control panel. The MCP provides input commands to the FCCs for controlling airspeed, heading, vertical speed, and altitude. Selectable values are shown in display windows controlled by rotary selector switches. When electrical power is first applied to the aircraft, the MCP will display the default values of 200 knots, 000 heading, a blank vertical speed window, and then 1,000 feet altitude. The MCP controls include mode selector switches with light bars. Engaged pitch modes are displayed in green on the lower left side of each ADI. Engaged roll modes are shown in green on the lower right side. In most situations, pitch and roll modes can be disengaged by engaging another mode of the same type. Engaged modes can also be disengaged by disconnecting the autopilot and switching off both flight directors. The LNAV and VNAV switches will be covered in the FMS lesson. The remaining 3 switches are used for ILS approaches and will be covered later. To expedite coverage of the MCP, let's first look at altitude control. Rotating the altitude selector changes the window setting in 100-foot increments. The display range is from 0 to 50,000 feet. In addition to the autopilot flight director, the selected altitude is used by the Thrust Management Computer, FMS, and Altitude Alert System. For the remainder of the lesson, some MCP tasks will involve the rotary selector switches. For teaching purposes, you'll need only to click on the selector switch to set the associated display window. With that in mind, click on the right arrow. There are 2 altitude engagement modes, hold and capture. For safety reasons, the modes engage automatically. Altitude capture engages when the aircraft approaches the selected altitude. In addition to the ADI annunciation, altitude capture illuminates the altitude hold switch. Altitude hold engages when the aircraft reaches the selected MCP altitude. If the capture range will not allow a smooth level off, the aircraft will overshoot and then return to the selected altitude. Altitude hold can also be engaged by pressing the altitude hold switch. This causes the aircraft to capture and maintain the altitude that existed when the switch was pressed, usually resulting in an overshoot. Rotating the speed selector changes the speed window from a range of 100 to 399 knots. The selector also moves the command bugs on both airspeed indicators. During pre-flight, V2 is selected in the MCP, 138 knots in this example. Actual airspeed is displayed when the flight level change is engaged. When the FMS controls airspeed, the speed window blanks and the command bug indicates the FMS commanded airspeed. When airspeed is displayed, pressing the IAS Mach selector switch changes the window from indicated airspeed to the equivalent Mach number, if current Mach is 0.40 or higher. Pressing the switch again redisplays indicated airspeed. When accelerating through the equivalent Mach 0.80, the speed window automatically changes from indicated airspeed to Mach. Conversely, when Mach decreases to the equivalent speed of 300 knots, the window will display indicated airspeed. Pressing the flight level change switch selects that mode for engagement. Mode engagement is indicated by speed for the pitch mode. In addition, the auto throttle, if armed, will indicate flight level change as its engaged mode. As mentioned previously, when flight level change engages, the command airspeed bug moves to the existing airspeed, which is also displayed in the speed window. In this example, the actual airspeed was below the original bug speed when flight level change was engaged. Consequently, it is imperative that you immediately check the speed window after selecting flight level change to ensure that the desired airspeed will be flown. If the current mode is altitude, capture, or hold, a new altitude must be selected on the MCP before flight level change will engage. During flight level change, climbs, or descents, speed changes are made by selecting the desired speed with the IAS Mach selector. As the aircraft levels off at the selected altitude, the auto throttle engages in speed, and the pitch mode changes to altitude capture, then altitude hold. Let's now look at heading control. Rotating the heading selector changes the window setting and moves the heading marker on both HSIs. A heading select switch is incorporated in the heading selector. Pressing the switch selects the heading select mode for engagement, which commands an immediate turn in the nearest direction to the selected heading. When in the heading select mode, selecting a new heading commands the autopilot to turn in the same direction, which the heading selector was turned. This occurs even when the heading change exceeds 180 degrees. Located behind the heading selector is a blank limit selector, which selects the maximum bank angle when heading select is engaged. The auto position permits variable bank angles from 15 to 25 degrees, depending on airspeed. Manually selecting 5 to 25 degrees limits the bank angle, regardless of airspeed. The heading hold switch selects the heading hold mode for engagement. When heading hold is engaged while turning, the aircraft will roll out of the turn and hold the heading that exists when the wings become level. In the heading hold mode, the autopilot holds existing aircraft heading without regard to the selected heading. Let's now look at vertical speed control.